Harbor comes through the PRC 163 as a snow of static. Then the message lands clean enough to cut. Beacon lost at MGRS 10, Tango Echo Uniform, 684921, 23 minutes dark. In the soaked hide, Master Chief Aaron Vega counts heads without drama, and the gap stays. Lieutenant Evan Parker did not come off the switchback after the slide. NVG Grain rides the rain sheets. A red chem light dims under a poncho. The watch face says 2:10 a.m. Claire Whisper Monroe feels her glove slipping on wet webbing and fixes it. Then checks her Fortrex 701 breadcrumb. She asks for 45 minutes. Marcus Reed mutters doubt. Jenna Alvarez presses a hypothermia wrap into her hands. Warm from her own chest. MH-60S is grounded for wind and sealing. Gusts hit 55 knots. Visibility sits between 10 and 30 meters. Claire shoulders the Mark 20 rain sleeve. Keeps the M4, A1, URG, I slung, and keeps noise discipline like a vow. Every team hits a point when someone stops asking and starts owning the dark. Kodiak green lights a solo probe. The op begins with silence as the signal. Rain stacks on the tarp, and the hide smells like cedar and cold batteries. Marcus Reed leans into the murk and throws weight on her request. 45 minutes alone, after Lieutenant Evan Parker. Master Chief Aaron Vega steadies the air with questions en route. Timing. Abort. Then listens to Harbor hiss about MH-60S, grounded. Winds near 55 knots. Visibility, 10 to 30 meters. Claire Whisper Monroe checks the Fortrex 701 breadcrumb and shapes a clean MGRS in her head. For a second she almost rushes it. Then she stops. Jenna Alvarez slides a hypothermia wrap into Claire's palms. Still warm from under her plate. And that silent handoff tips the scale. Vega's gloved thumb touches the PTT for Kodiak, authorizing a solo probe with 15-minute radio windows. Claire stages the MK-20 in its rain sleeve. Keeps the M4A1 URGI slung. Settles her PVS-31. And seals her own breathing to noise discipline. Water beads along the PRC antenna while the camp light dulls and the storm takes the rest. Courage is rarely loud. It is a small Roger in rotten weather. She moves when the gusts lift and holds when the canopy screams. A metronome set by weather and not by nerves. Noise discipline lives in her teeth and tongue. Claire Whisper Monroe reads slope aspect with her boots, skirting noisy creek edges for quieter micro-terrain, letting dead space swallow her shape. NVG Grain swims over rain sheets. The Fortrex 701 blinks steady in her palm, and she keeps its screen dim to save a battery that already feels thin. A cough rises under cedar roots. Not the storm. Human. She freezes. Hand tight on wet webbing. Breath counting to 3 before she trusts her ears again. A torn strip of multicam quivers on Salo. Guessing becomes following. She lowers her voice on the PRC. Kodiak. Update. Grid 1, 0, Tango, Echo, Uniform, 686923. Viz 10 to 15 meters. Continuing northeast 1 click. Harbor stays quiet and that helps. She keeps the MK-20 in its rain sleeve. The M4, A1 erg, I, slung. And heat close to core with small choices a line operator would make without thinking. The forest is not an opponent. It is a language she speaks. She moves again. And the forest answers with room. Claire Whisper Monroe halts because a wrong note slips between the rain ropes. Not water. Not branch. Something prepared. Through PVS-31 glow, she picks out 3 red jackals in a staggered file. Spacing tight. One head haloed hotter than the rest. Thermal. their muzzles low but ready, their steps measured like they drilled on this hillside. A clipped burst rasps across the weather, short and unencrypted. Just numbers and a bearing tossed into the storm. Content stays hidden. Tempo does not. She slides into a nurse log, slick with rot and fur scent, letting dead space fold over her as the trio ghosts past. Rain hisses on suppressed barrels. Breath clouds at 10 meters and fades. Noise discipline becomes a habit she can feel in her jaw. She counts their cadence and the hold intervals they keep at terrain breaks. One of them drags a toe in the mud on every third bound. A tiny misstep that gives rhythm to the grid search, closing around the cedar root pocket where a human could wait. She palms a right in the rain card, the pencil scratching small arrows that bleed in water. The pattern emerges. Two are angling to pinch the root well where Lieutenant Evan Parker might be. The third is sliding wide to cover the obvious sniper lane, head scanning where any shooter would set up. A second clipped burst hits. New numbers. Fresh bearing. And she runs a fast resection in her head to plot their squeeze. For a heartbeat, she almost shifts too soon. Then she stops. A gust rips through the hemlocks and the forest shudders. And she lets that be her clock. They are not hiding from the weather. They are surfing it. Bounding when the canopy roars because it hides their feet. Freezing when the white noise drops. That truth cools her. She eases the Mk-20 SSR in its rain sleeve against the nurse log. Keeps the M4A1 URG quiet against her chest. And checks the Fortrex breadcrumb without letting its dim glow spill. The plan changes. She will slip past the converging net on their lull, not on hers. And she will time the move between their bounds where even thermal has to guess. Strong adversaries lift the story. Tonight, the opposition raises the bar. She creeps backward through ferns, water filling her cuffs, and waits for the next roar to move. The enemy's competence thickens the air in the best way. Because now the path forward is clear and narrow. She drops over a muddy lip, and the earth yields a human outline where it should be roots and rock. Lieutenant Evan Parker is wedged under cedar fingers. Leg wrong. Eyes bright and present. Claire Whisper Monroe steadies a hand on his shoulder. Voice low, and even, and he gives her what matters in short pulses. Pain here. Cold rising. No ringing in his head. She shifts him deeper into a pocket under the root flare. Turns the space into a small room with fern fronds, and her rain poncho stretched just enough to break edges. The silver blanket breathes under the rain like a fish trying to live on land. She hates that thought and lets it go. On the PRC 152 Alpha, she whispers a status to Kodiak. Grid 10 Tango Echo, Uniform 687925. Visibility 10 to 30 meters. Enemy grid search, compressing from north and east. Assuming no bird from harbor due to winds. She keeps it clipped and lets the storm swallow the tail. The Fortrex 701 winks dim, and she angles the screen away from the world. For a second, she almost says too much. Then she stops. She manages heat where it counts and pressure where it threatens without making a show of it. The Mk-20 stays in its rain sleeve. The M4A1 URGI rides slung and quiet. Parker's hand finds hers once. Not drama. Just a signal that lands. He answers with economy that helps the plan take shape. They will not move now. They will move when the search grid breathes in and before it breathes out again. Rescue is a verb first. A headline later. She frames the window in her head. A narrow seam between patrol bounds. The forest does the rest. Turning poncho and fern into a disguise she could never carry in a pack. Claire Whisper Monroe feels the trio closing by the way the storm keeps giving them cover. She rejects the ground lane every shooter would pick, and slides into a slick low perch inside a splintered cedar crotch. Rain streaks across her optic glass. The Mk-20 in its rain sleeve settles against bark. The M4A1URG1 stays slung because distance is still their friend. PVS-31 glow makes the trunk swim. Parker's breath is shallow behind her, and it catches on the same gusts she uses as a clock. A flanker breaks cover to cut the angle. The forest becomes a tunnel with a single answer. The crack is swallowed by rain, and he folds into the ferns. She is already gone, displaced through soaked dead space that smells like rot and cold iron. For a second, she almost turns to check her mark. Then, she stops. The professional will try to read her like terrain, not like a panic. She watches where he should go, not where he is. The thermal user pauses at a stump, then shifts for the lane she refused. That is the moment she has been holding for. A blurred flash, and then nothing. The space she was in a breath ago is empty again. She promised Parker she was not leaving. Promises like that get kept by prediction, not luck. Her hands shake once. A small aftershock she lets pass. Precision in chaos is faith, expressed as practice. The storm takes the noise back. Parker is still with her. Gravity and expectation are the only enemies left in the trees. The line is a simple thing. Tubular webbing biting through a poncho grommet. Clipped to what she can pull without tearing him apart. Claire Whisper Monroe leans into it, and Lieutenant Evan Parker slides an inch at a time from the cedar pocket. The silver blanket whispering under the rain. She times movement to gust peaks, so storm noise covers, boot suck, and branch scrape. Then she freezes behind a root wad when a fresh red jackal's patrol fans the ravine. A thermal sweep washes the slope. She keeps her face down and still, counting 3 slow breaths while the wash drifts on. For a second, she almost shifts too early. Then she stops. Kodiak. Moving south by southeast. 1.5 clicks short of Raven. Request exfil window. The PRC reply rides static from harbor. Negative aircraft. Winds 5-0 plus and ceiling low. Copy. She pockets the weight of that answer and chooses shallow spur creek beds over the main channel. The flow thin enough to hide sound without stealing her footing. The Mk-20 SSR stays in its rain sleeve. The M4A1 URGI rides slung and quiet. PVS-31 glow paints the trunks in wet green. Noise discipline sits in her chest like a heavy coin. They work in short bounds and longer hides. She caches non-essential items under a moss lip, tags the place in her head for the return that might never happen. Alvarez layered Parker well back at the pocket. Claire adds one more liner from her own kit and does not think about later when she will need it. His teeth click once, then stop. He squeezes the dragline twice to say, ready. The ravine opens to another fan of patrols. She waits for the storm's metronome to give the downbeat. Wind hammers the canopy and they move, dragging past slick roots and soft mud that tries to take her boot. She wrenches free, breath loud for a heartbeat, then flat again. Fortrex shows the breadcrumb shrinking toward Raven like a small marathon no one asked for. Hart's voice is a rumor on net. Briggs whispers that IR marking is ready when skies allow. Reed holds west for the pinch. Vega keeps the channel level and spare. Heroism is often logistics under duress. She nods to no one, leans into the line, and lets the storm set their move and their stillness. Bounding pairs start carving angled cut lanes through the ravine. Claire Whisper Monroe feels the pattern hit her nerves, the way off rhythm hurts a song. The leader's cadence leaks through light encryption. Not words. Just tempo spikes that mean the grid is tightening. She hates this shape of hunt because it squeezes air out of choices. She palms a tiny chem shard from a pocket and lets it settle under brown water where the creek shallows. A half-buried boot scuff points downstream the wrong way. No flourish, just a nudge. Minutes are currency, and she plans to spend 8 of them well. She presses Parker's shoulder once, layers the space blanket and poncho tighter over his core, then breathes with the gusts until her chest stops rushing ahead of her feet. Kodiak. Update. Moving northeast on shallow spur lines. Grid contraction sensed. No aircraft expected from harbor. The PRC-152 Alpha replies with weather like a wall. Copy. She trims weight. Caches a pouch under a moss lip. Tags the spot in her head with a crooked cedar and a rock split like a tooth. The Mk-20 SSR rides quiet in its rain sleeve. The M4 A1URG-1 stays slung and patient. PVS-31 grain turns the trunks into a slow tide. Boots splash past the chemshard without pausing. The glow barely moves. But it moves enough. The leader hesitates. Recalculates. Throws his pairs farther downstream. The lane above them opens like a locked jaw easing. She shifts terrain lines with Parker an arm's length at a time. Trading speed for stealth. Never letting his warmth slide below her own. He squeezes the dragline once to say good. She answers by stopping when her legs want to push. Reed holds west, promising a pinch when winds give. Briggs murmurs that IR marking stays dark until skies play along. Harbor reports nothing with blades. Claire keeps the radio short and lets Rain finish her sentences. Noise discipline lives in her tongue even when she is tired. Deception is not fireworks. It is a small push that tilts the board. A split focus lands. Her eyes stay steady, while somewhere in the dark, the leader pauses again. The minutes she bought begin to earn interest. The flood-cut ravine yawns in front of them. A windfall cedar lies across it. Bark slick. Spine bowed by water. It is the only span that will not drown them. Claire Whisper Monroe tests the first step, and the log shivers but holds. She feels her glove creep on wet wood and resets her grip. Lieutenant Evan Parker waits behind her. Breath measured. One hand on the drag line, like a promise. He will not break. PVS-31 grain turns the water below into a crawling field of sparks. Gusts hit in hard pulses, and the whole forest leans and then settles. She chooses carbine over the Mk-20 SSR because the bridge is a shoulder, not a field. The M4 A1URG I sits where it needs to sit. She starts across, keeping her knees soft so the log does not bounce. Halfway, a red jackal steps into view on the far bank. Weapon low and ready. Eyes hot with borrowed night. Distance collapses. Near contact is not theory anymore. Claire lets the storm be her muzzle report, and the man folds into ferns before the echo can find him. For a second, she almost turns to check him. Then she stops. The span bucks anyway. The cedar jolts, and Parker slides. The drag line snaps tight against her wrist. She drops her center and dives for it. Forearm catching rope that bites through wet skin. The river claws for both of them and loses. Macro tight. Wet gloves bite into the line and hold. A dog tag clicks once against the log like a metronome. Breath fog jumps in bursts as she hauls him back to the spine of the cedar and braces her boots until the shaking quiets. The PRC-163 hisses in her ear, and for a heartbeat she hears only rain on the antenna. They inch the rest of the span in short bounds. The IR panel stays buried for later. On the far bank, she rolls Parker into a shallow pocket of sword, fern, and cedar duff, and the world widens from 1 foot to 3. Fortrek's breadcrumb shows Raven only 2 minutes east through a brief gap in the trees. She keys the radio and lets brevity do its job. Crossed. 2 minutes to Raven. Package conscious. The reply is just enough to count as a human voice. Rank gives authority, but leadership is the hand that catches the falling line. The water lunges black and hard below, as if it still wants a say. She sets her shoulders and moves. The firefight and the rescue occupy a space no wider than a shoulder. And that is enough. Ravine is a shallow cave slick with moss and cold air. Claire Whisper Monroe eases Lieutenant Evan Parker inside, and the forest noise drops to a wet hush. Her knees ache, and she lets one shake out, then tucks it under as habit brings her between him and the entrance. Hospital Corpsman HM2 Jenna Alvarez arrives first. Calm hands already warming and checking Parker without fuss. A quiet yes and no that settles the room. PRC traffic from Kodiak stays spare. Harbor calls winds easing to about 35 knots. Possible bird in 30 minutes if the ceiling holds. Claire hears it. Files it. Does not spend it yet. Chief Boatswain's Mott Noah Briggs slides a low-profile IR panel into place and dusts it with fern to dull the shine. Petty Officer, Second Class, Dylan Hart, kills anything that hums. His fingers finding switches in the dark, like he has done this 100 times. Master Chief Aaron Vega steps in with his brim dripping and meets Claire's eyes. He gives a single nod that feels heavier than praise. The Fortrex 701 rides quiet on her wrist. Breadcrumb to the pickup steady. PVS 31 lenses fog and clear as bodies breathe. Claire sits but not all the way, keeping one boot under her to stand without thought if the cave suddenly narrows again. Outside, dawn begins to gray the trees and the rain loses some of its teeth. The IR strobe in Briggs's pocket pulses once. Checked. Then sleeps. Payoffs should be quiet. Applause breaks the spell. She watches Parker's color climb back to normal and lets relief arrive like a slow tide. No louder than it needs to be. Reunion is a whisper that carries further than a shout. Morning shows torn hillsides and spent rivers. An MH-60S settles for Kodiak's lift. PRC 163, chatter from harbor, drops to confirmations. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Reed hands Claire Whisper, Monroe water, and a low admission he was wrong. She lets it pass. Lieutenant Evan Parker stays stable under HM2 Jenna Alvarez's eye while Master Chief Aaron Vega watches them settle. Some legends are just people who stayed with the hard thing longer than was reasonable. A hand on the skid. Ferns flattened by rotor wash. Forest quiet.